Hi, I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and today I'm going to show you from start to finish how to applique a block using printable fusible adhesive. So this is the pattern for a single block. It's hazel. I've labeled all of the pieces that you're going to be cutting out so that if you get them mixed up with another bird block, you can keep your beaks separate and your bellies separate. A lot of the pieces are very similar in shape. So this is from one of my patterns, and what I've done is already prep it for use with a fusible adhesive. That means that the patterns have already been reversed, because you always need to use the reversed image when you're using the fusible adhesive, because the glue is on the back side. And they've also been exploded so that the belly is moved out of here, because what you're going to want is a little extra fabric here to tuck under the belly piece. So I've already exploded it so that we have a little bit of space between all of our pieces. If you're using another pattern that hasn't had this happen, you're just going to need to trace onto the paper side of your adhesive, of your fusible adhesive, you're going to need to trace the reversed image of the pattern. So you want to trace the mirror image of what you want the final image to look like. This one, it's already been done. So the first thing you're going to do is what I call rough cut around all the pieces. That means you want to cut with a little bit of space showing. So you're not cutting right on the line. You're just cutting a little bit past the line. It does not have to be much at all, especially past the solid lines. I leave a little extra space past the dotted lines, and you'll see why in just a minute. So we're just going to rough cut all of these pieces out. This is a big enough scrap that I'm going to save it because I can use that for a smaller piece later. I'm going to cut around the belly. Cut around the tail. Again, I'm going to leave just a little bit of extra room here where I've got a dotted line. Then I'm going to cut the two eyes as one piece and the beak. So now I've got all of my pieces rough cut. The next step is to fuse those down to the back side of the fabric. So let's start with the eyeballs before I lose them. They're going to go on just a plain black fabric. I've been using black for all of the eyes of all of the birds in this quilt, so they'll all kind of go. Your fusible adhesive is going to be papery on one side, and it's going to be bumpy on the other side. That's the adhesive, and it's going to melt when we iron it. The temperature that you need to iron it at is different for every manufacturer. Some of them want steam, some of them want no steam, some of them want a very hot iron, some of them want a slightly cooler iron. You just need to read the instructions on the package of whatever you have. And then I rough cut around that piece. We'll cut it out more precisely in just a minute. First, I like to get everything fused down. So we've got eyeballs. I'm going to take care of that beak before I lose that small little piece. Again, you're going to put it adhesive, the bumpy adhesive side down to the back side of your fabric. See the front side and the back side. Because what we're doing here is applying the glue. And that's going to stick right to the top there. I'm going to use this kind of neutral cream color with some little dots on it. This is going to be my bird's belly. So just give it a little bit of a press first if it's got any wrinkles in it. Stick that down. Give it a little rough cut around it. The pieces are just a little easier to manage once they don't have a lot of fabric on them. My tail is going to be this dark blue fabric with some polka dots on it. And this fabric doesn't really have any direction to it. It works in any direction, so I'm just going to put it on there in the way to use the fabric most efficiently. the next one, you'll see we're going to worry a little bit about the direction. There's the tail piece, and now I just need the body. And the body is going to go on this beautiful chevron print. And since it does have a definite direction, I don't want to put it down so that the zigzags will be going crossways on it. I really want them to be going straight across the body. So I am going to actually think about the placement and try and get that on there neatly. Fuse this piece in place. And then rough cut around it. All right, now we have all of our pieces rough cut, and now they're smaller and they're going to be easier for us to manage to do our more careful cutting. So let's start with the belly, but that's a simple one. This is all a solid outline, so I'm going to cut it right on that line all the way around. And when you've got a solid line and you're doing a smooth cut, try and make it as smooth as you can. You don't want any jaggedy edges here because this edge is going to be visible. So the belly is cut. Now the tail has both a solid outline and a dotted line. The dotted line on all of my patterns indicates where this piece is going to tuck behind another piece. So I never cut actually on the dotted line. I cut just a little bit past it. So I'll have a little bit to tuck underneath, and you'll see when we put the whole thing together what that does. And then I'm going to go and cut on the solid line. I'm going to cut right on that line, or close enough. Depending on the pattern, you may or may not need to be super precise with your cutting. Mine are big, easy shapes that are pretty forgiving. So now the tail piece is cut out, and I've got that little bit extending past the dotted line. So the beak is all solid line. I'm going to cut that out. Now I have a beak, and all of these pieces are labeled, which is going to help you if you are doing your blocks kind of assembly line. You won't get your eyeballs and your tails and your bellies and things mixed up. So these eyes are small. Set them someplace where you'll be able to find them again later. But they're just simple ovals, so they're not a tricky shape to cut out. And then the last thing is the body. And this is another one where we have some solid lines and some dotted lines. So this time I'm going to cut the solid line first. By doing a rough cut initially around the pattern pieces before we fuse them down, that allows us to have adhesive going right up to the cut edge of the fabric. Sometimes I'll see people that want to cut the pattern pieces out before they fuse them down. They want to cut them right on the line and stick them down and then try and cut the fabric out to match the edge of the pattern piece. And that's really hard to do accurately. Even if you get a really close cut, you're still usually going to have a few threads at the edge maybe showing that don't have the adhesive, and that's just a few threads that can come loose on your finished block. So now I'm going to do this dotted line, and just like on the tail piece, I'm going to give myself a little bit here that can go tuck underneath the belly piece when we stick that down. Now we have the body piece cut out. We're almost ready to assemble the final block, but I need to show you one more thing. And this is important. If you're tracing the pattern, you want to make sure to trace any facial features onto your pattern piece, even if you're not going to cut these out. And here's why. You need to transfer that image, and it's easiest if it's on this adhesive. This is stuck really well. It's going to stabilize the fabric. I'm going to put it in a window. So you can see once the light is shining through it, it's very easy to see those marks. And I'm just going to draw a little circle inside each of these shapes. I'm not drawing it right on the line because then I have to get my pieces exactly on there. This way I have a little wiggle room, but I know where the eyes are supposed to go and where the beak is supposed to go. You want to make sure to do that step before you peel the back off. Now it's time to stick it all down. So I've got my block. Now I'm using the Quilt As You Go technique on this quilt, and I'm doing it backwards. So I've actually already quilted my block. You can see some straight line quilting in there. By doing that before I do the applique, it means I didn't have to go around the applique to do it, and I could just do straight lines, zip zip, and that was really fun and easy. So now I'm going to applique on top of this quilt block. You see the back, you can see the quilting really clearly. So start peeling pieces off. You're just going to peel that paper backing off. And you can see that the back of the fabric is all shiny and smooth now. The adhesive is fused to the back of the fabric. And when we fuse it down later to the block, when we're all done laying it out, that's going to melt, that glue is going to melt again, and this time it'll stick that fabric to the block. So now the tail, if you remember, has that little dotted line there, so that tail curve is going to tuck under the body. Oh, and I shifted my bird the wrong direction. So this is the time that you can really play around with all of your pieces too. You could make the tail come up higher if you wanted. In my original design, I've got it down pretty low on the body. And that seems pretty well centered. I don't usually try and get things exactly centered, and I like things to be a little bit off kilter sometimes. So now we're going to put the belly on there. Peel the back off. We're going to just stick that down. Now when I cut out, when I left a little bit around that dotted line, I left a little bit of overhang that was going to show past the belly there. So I just snipped those corners off. And now my belly's going to line up there. I'm going to adjust that tail just a little bit. Once you stick this down, it's pretty much stuck. I've seen people do stuff where they reheat it and move things around while it's still warm, but that's hard to do. So before I put the face on or anything, I'm just going to do a quick stick to get these things in place. And I am being really careful not to move the iron around. I'm just lifting it up and pressing it in place. And I'm not counting seconds or anything on this right now. I'm just getting a quick stick. I'll come back and do it properly in a second when I have got the features on. I just didn't want to, I had those where I liked them and I didn't want to bump them. So now we're going to stick the beak on, and I've got my handy dandy outline there, and since I did it smaller than the beak, I just need to make the beak cover that outline and we're good. Same thing with the eyes. Put one eye. Just peeling the backing off. And put the other eye. Make sure that all looks good. And now I'm going to do the fusing down for real. So usually most of the manufacturers, again it's different for everyone, but most of them you are sticking it down pretty quickly to get the initial fuse, and then the second fuse when you're bonding fabric to fabric is a little bit longer. So make sure you're reading all the directions and don't just assume that the first directions are for all of the sticking, because usually it's a quicker hit and also a lower temperature for that initial, just to fuse the paper to the fabric. You do want to make sure to move your iron a little bit, because most irons have little divots on the bottom, and this one has a pretty big one where the foot comes out. It's got nice small ones everywhere else and a big flat plate there with no divots at all. but you want to make sure that you're getting a nice even fuse. So you want to move it so that your bumps move around. And that is done. I like to let it cool flat before I do anything else with it. And then all I'm going to do is go back around it. I'm going to just straight normal stitching, nothing fancy, no fancy stitch, just a straight stitch, all in black thread. And I'm going to stitch all the way around this block. And then I'll have a link to a blog post that goes with this video, and that'll show a video, a still shot of the finished block so that you can zoom in and see it real close. So that's it. Now that I've discovered some products I really like for fusible adhesive, adhesives that aren't too stiff and that work really well, I really, really love this method for applique quilts. You can see that it's really fast, really easy, and it allows you to play around with the pieces some because it's easy to move them around, like moving that tail up and down, or you can tip the body a little bit on the block, and it's just really easy and fun to play with. I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World. I'll see you next time.